Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's TOC podcast. I'm Joe Weichert, chair of O'Reilly's Tools of Change conference. If you want to see all the upcoming TOC products and events we have in the works, make sure you visit us at o'reilly.com/TOC. Today's podcast is brought to you by Publishers Weekly, our event partner for TOC. Be sure to watch for regular TOC coverage and original content on publishersweekly.com and in their print editions. So today I'm joined by Bruno Fernandez-Ruiz, an architect fellow and vice president at Yahoo. Bruno, welcome to this TOC podcast.
Hi, Joe. Thank you. Thank you for having us on your podcast.
You bet. So let's start off, Bruno, by having you tell us a little bit about your team, the Cloud Platform Group. What do you guys do at Yahoo, and what areas do you look after?
Yeah, so the Cloud Platform Group at Yahoo looks after all our infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and what we call knowledge as a service tiers. We work with Hadoop, we work with structured storage, unstructured storage. We develop edge content distribution solutions, and we apply machine learning and statistical analysis for deriving information out of raw data.
Okay, and you've done actually created a platform called Cocktails, right?
Yeah, that's right. So over the past few months, we've been working on bringing that knowledge closer to the publishers to make it easy to expose all those good recommendations and targeting systems to our own properties and to other publishers in the form of a combination of technologies like HTML5, JavaScript, server-side JavaScript through Node.js, and giving the ability to create compelling applications that run and can be distributed through an app store model, as well as a browser, a mobile browser or a desktop browser.
And Livestand, I believe, is an app, an iPad app that was created with Cocktails, right?
That's correct. Livestand app was built completely with Cocktails. It uses several of the components of Cocktails. It's a fully HTML5 app. It leverages, a lot of the graphics that happen are CSS3 animations, 2D and 3D transforms to make it very smooth. We've done a lot of optimization in Livestand to make the performance very silk, very smooth when you use it. So the user experience is very good. And then we leverage things like the server-side JavaScript or Manhattan Cocktail to be able to offload sometimes some of those computational tasks that are expensive on device, and otherwise the device will feel a little bit jerky. We're able to push it back to the server side. Okay.
So as you expand out, I guess, into the content management side of the world, are there any sorts of content and presentation lessons that your group has learned through this Livestand project?
Definitely. There's several lessons which we think are important. One of them is mobile devices and connected devices and tablets are at the end of the day, they are disconnected. They don't have a wire next to them. As such, one of the things you learn is that you need to design your application for what we call partially connected, right? It's not always connected, not always disconnected. You keep on connecting and disconnecting. And that implies that you need to leverage some of the storage on device, but you need to also learn how to live with server-side, how to replicate state. And those are, complex things to do that by default, an HTML5 app or an Objective-C app or an Android app just doesn't do, right? The second one that we have really focused on is performance. When using HTML5, HTML, the web as general, was designed as a web publishing platform. It wasn't designed as a web programming platform. Now, it happens to be that, over the last few years, people have been, JavaScript was born, and then, JavaScript continued to grow, and JavaScript became the programming language for the browser, and the document object model became the API that you had to interact with the browser. But the reality is that things like memory management, which are a basic thing you do with programming languages, are not available in a web browser. So how do you manage to make sure that when you're allocating, you're creating a new web view, you're putting new content on the page, you don't run out of memory and the operating system kills the app, which is, sometimes what we see in some of the other apps that are shrink-wrap, HTML5, they put it into a shell, they put it into the App Store, and the users go like, well, this first feels slow, and the second thing is like once in a while it crashes. And those are hard things that we have, our engineers have been working on to to make sure that we address those performance concerns.
So you just hit on two really important elements to me as a user. The partially connected nature of using a tablet and the performance issues. I can't tell you how many times I've opened up an app, and I won't name any names here, but where I'm wishing, oh my gosh, I'm out of range, I'm on a plane, whatever, I'm not connected right now, why didn't this thing sync up for me beforehand? Or I'm just waiting forever and ever for this application to load up all the content. And tell you what, if you can solve those two problems, I think you've gone a long way in this world.
So that's been our intent. Is actually, if I were to open now my iPad, but it wouldn't show up too well, you would actually notice that there is content in there. And that's one of the things that is, HTML by itself doesn't give you, but with Cocktails you get. Is this notion of background, long running processes, that when the app is running, it keeps doing that syncing. So by the time you get disconnected on the plane, there is content in there. And if the content is not all of it available, for example, you might have the content body, but you don't have the images. We know that's the case. We're going to show you the body and remove those images. So, there's a lot of optimization, a lot of design, both from the UI guys building the UI as well from the engineers, the product managers. It's been a constant drive to solve for performance and for partial connectivity.
Okay. A lot of the people that are tuning into this are from the publishing community, book publishing in particular. And they're doing experimentations with EPUB and HTML5, as well as native apps, iOS and Android. So why should publishers pay attention to the Livestand app that you put out, as well as the Cocktails platform itself? Is this another opportunity for them to do additional testing?
Yeah, so I think there are three things that publishers can get out of this, right? The first one is a proof point, industry-wise, regardless of whether they go and use Livestand or Cocktails. That HTML5 with the right amount of engineering can be put in place to be competitive with native development. We've shown Livestand to journalists that were not aware that this was a web application. They thought this is just native. And when we told them, no, actually, this is a web application, they go like, I don't believe you. So that's just a basic proof point that I think a lot of publishers that are facing the problem of, I enter iOS, it actually was more expensive than I thought to enter the iOS development because, iOS developers are expensive and they're rare to find, good ones. Then I have to do the same thing on Android, and I will have to do the same thing on Windows, and my costs just keep going up. It doesn't actually stop. And one of the things with, at least from our perspective as a publisher, is if we have 200 properties and we want to run all those on all these app stores, it's just prohibitive to develop against those native applications. So if nothing else, what Livestand proves is that the web will continue to be economically an alternative for application development, even though we might not be building the traditional websites that we used to. The second thing is Livestand itself, which is essentially allows publishers to gather content in front of millions of Yahoo users and get access basically to a very large audience. And on Livestand, you can actually log in with a Facebook ID, you can log in with a Google ID, you can log in with a Yahoo ID. And we are basically solving the technology problem for those publishers, right? So you'll see that people like Forbes, Extreme Tech, Surfers Magazine, those guys are in Livestand and they leverage our technology. It's not just the presentation technologies. It's not just Cocktails. They leverage our advertising and targeting systems, and they're leveraging our personalization and recommendation systems. And that's part of the package. So as a publisher, I don't have to care anymore about doing all hard work. Basically, Livestand is a good place for me to come with my content and just put it and distribute it. The third thing is Cocktails itself, right? And we said in November that we would open source, and we're going to do it in a matter of weeks. We're going to open source the first cocktail, which is called Mojito. And the intent really is to help, in an open manner, the community look at what we created. Hopefully they'll find that it's interesting for them too, and start working with us and with the rest of the community that we hope we can build around it to help publishers use Mojito to create their own applications that they can distribute by themselves on the App Store, they can distribute on Marketplace, they can distribute whatever way they want, or just have as a web app they run.
Okay. want to come back to that openness of HTML5 versus some other formats and platforms. But just as a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by TOC's event partner, Publishers Weekly, and I'm speaking with Bruno Fernandez-Ruiz of Yahoo. Bruno, so is there an opportunity for book publishers to jump in now and experiment by putting their content into Livestand? And if so, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so right now we continue onboarding new publishers into Livestand. If you actually install Livestand, Livestand has its own publication within Livestand, and it shows basically, we keep onboarding like 2-3 people, 2-3 publishers on a very regular basis. If publishers are interested, in more publishers are interested to get into Yahoo, they should definitely contact us, and we'll start talking to them and seeing how we can get their content onto Livestand. And the integration can be as simple as an RSS feed all the way to very custom integration with layouts and viewers. I think you had a second question. Sorry about this.
Well, I was just wondering how publishers can get involved. I think you've kind of summarized that for us pretty well here. And I want to go back to something we both talked about before, where publishers are wrestling with Mobi on the Kindle and EPUB for other e-reader formats. And then there's that, do I develop an app? And if I do, is it just for iOS? Do I have to invest with Android as well? And it's clear that you folks are looking to HTML5 as the future. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So do you think that over time the other formats are going to go away? What do you think the future looks like here for book publishers?
I think eventually, in some years to go, and this is like a crystal ball, right?
Yeah.
Formats will converge. For the time being, EPUB and Mobi and a few others, I mean, some of them are open, some of them are closed, which has its own advantages. But they are designed to book formats. It's not a very general publication style that is really applicable outside of a book format. I just actually downloaded over the weekend for my kids Yellow Submarine by the Beatles, which is actually a book. It's a very interactive book that has sound, images moving, has videos embedded. It's an interactive book. That's the sort of thing where HTML5 will help build those things without having to go back. But the traditional linear book, that you go from page 1 to page 300, and you just keep flipping your pages because you're fully embedded in the book, I think will continue to exist, right? I mean, it has been there for 400 years. It's going to continue for another 400. So those formats will continue to support that. I think that the interesting part is that this is creating the opportunity for magazines and interactive books and slightly new formats. So publishers, have a chance now to come up with new designs, new products they can put in front of the users. It's not anymore video on your TV and the book on your lap. Is how can you combine those things and make it really interesting? That's where HTML5, I think, is really going to help.
Yeah, and as you were describing that, here's an image that came to mind. You tell me if you feel like this is fair enough, but I kind of get the impression that Mobi and EPUB are obviously, they have their roots in books, right? And so what we're trying to see happening, I think, in the industry is those formats adding more functionality and growing out to support things that are beyond books, maybe just richer content of various types. Whereas with HTML5, we have kind of this Swiss Army knife, that already does everything, and it can do books better and better as more tags and functionality is added. So why not go there versus the proprietary or even open standard of something that's book specific to start with? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you follow similar analogy in the past with DocBook and Markdown. So yes, DocBook was very big, but it was because it was very tightly linked with styling for the print. Whereas Markdown was created for the web. And people say, well, Markdown is enough. And at some point, some publishers, I don't know if O'Reilly does it or not, but started saying, well, Markdown is enough. I transfer for the web because my web is my consumption medium for most stuff. Now, whatever goes into the press still continues to exist in the press. But it creates completely different opportunities that the formats become distinctive. I think the issue with HTML5 is going to be, unlike Markdown that was very focused, is HTML5 is a Swiss Army knife, and it does everything. So there's going to be a need for tools that help the publishers control those frameworks and those technologies, right? So we say Mojito is a framework, it's a web framework that we open, but you need something else. You need, the equivalent of Photoshop or a CS3, CS5. You need a Xerox Print. There's a bunch of tools from Quark. All those things that used to exist for the print, for the publishing workflow, will need to exist for the HTML5 workflow.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. That HTML5 is this great canvas for us, but you need to have a framework to be able to do something meaningful with it. So, Bruno Fernandez-Ruiz of Yahoo, I thank you so much for taking part with us today in this TOC podcast.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure.